Could queens command armies, direct sieges, and orchestrate military victories in a time when men often dominated the battlefield? Did medieval queens truly possess the strategic minds and unwavering resolve needed to lead the most brutal forms of warfare? From the 9th century to the late 15th century, the medieval period saw incredible displays of power and leadership from women who defied expectations and took direct command. Number 1. Isabella of Castile and the Long Siege of Granada. The late 15th century in the Iberian Peninsula was a time of immense change and conflict. For centuries, the Christian kingdoms of Spain had been pushing back against the Muslim emirates to the south, a long struggle known as the Reconquista. By the 1480s, only one major Muslim stronghold remained, the Emirate of Granada. Nestled among mountains and possessing formidable fortifications, Granada was a jewel of Moorish civilization, a rich center of culture, scholarship, and trade. Its very existence was a challenge to the emerging unified Christian Spain, leading the charge for the combined crowns of Castile and Aragon were the powerful and ambitious monarchs, Queen Isabella I of Castile and King Ferdinand II of Aragon. While Ferdinand was widely recognized as a shrewd military commander, Isabella's role in the long, arduous siege of Granada was fundamental, extending far beyond merely being a queen consort. Her involvement was practical, financial, and deeply personal, making the final push against Granada a testament to her unwavering determination. The siege, or more accurately the campaign against Granada, was not a single event but a series of military maneuvers, blockades, and direct assaults that stretched for 10 years from 1482 to 1492. It was a war of attrition demanding vast resources, relentless logistical support, and immense political will. Isabella was the backbone of this protracted effort. The initial stages of the Granada War saw the Castilian and Aragonese forces chipping away at smaller towns and fortresses surrounding Granada. The first major success came with the capture of Alhama de Granada in 1482, an important fortress that gave the Christians a foothold in the Granadan territory. This was followed by the capture of Loja, Vélez, Malaga, and Malaga itself. Each conquest was a slow, deliberate process, often involving sustained sieges, a testament to the strong defenses of the Nasrid kingdom and the fierce resistance of its inhabitants. Isabella was not merely a distant figure issuing decrees from her court. She often traveled with the army, her presence a powerful symbol of unity and determination for her troops. During the siege of Loja, in 1486, for instance, Isabella was present in the camp, overseeing supplies and morale. Her contemporary, Fernando del Pulgar, in his Crónica de los Reyes Católicos, noted her meticulous attention to the details of provisioning the army, ensuring that soldiers had food, weapons, and medical care. This level of involvement was unusual for a monarch, let alone a queen, and demonstrated her deep commitment to the war effort. The logistics of supplying such a large army for extended periods in hostile territory were enormous, requiring a robust system of transport, storage, and distribution. Isabella personally managed much of this intricate network, ensuring a steady flow of resources to the front lines. As the war progressed and the Christian forces closed in on the city of Granada itself, the nature of the campaign shifted. It became clear that a direct, swift assault on the heavily fortified city was unlikely to succeed. Granada was protected by rugged terrain, strong walls, and the formidable Alhambra fortress complex overlooking the city. Prolonged blockade and a war of attrition became the favorite strategy. The final siege of Granada began in earnest in 1491, with the Christian army establishing a massive encampment just outside the city walls. This was no temporary camp. It was designed to be a permanent presence, reflecting the long-term nature of the siege. A fire, possibly accidental, ravaged the Christian camp in July 1491, destroying many of the temporary structures and supplies. This incident could have demoralized the army and forced a retreat, but Isabella saw it as an opportunity to demonstrate the unwavering resolve of the Christian forces. She immediately ordered the construction of a permanent settlement on the site of the burnt camp. This new city, named Santa Fe, or Holy Faith, was built with astonishing speed. Its construction was a grand statement, a visible declaration to the defenders of Granada that the Castilian and Aragonese forces would not leave until the city fell. The building of Santa Fe was a massive undertaking requiring thousands of laborers and an immense amount of material. It was laid out in a grid pattern with 4 gates aligned with the 4 points of the compass. Within its walls, proper houses, churches, and administrative buildings were erected, providing a permanent base for the army and the royal court. Isabella was deeply involved in every aspect of Santa Fe's construction. She personally supervised its progress, ensuring that the work was carried out quickly and efficiently. Gonzalo Fernández de Oviedo y Valdez, in his Historia General Juan Natural de las Indias, documented the incredible speed of Santa Fe's construction, noting how it solidified the Christian position. The new city served multiple purposes. It provided secure accommodation for the army, acted as a logistical hub for supplies, and, crucially, served as a powerful psychological weapon against Granada's defenders. From their vantage point, the Granadans could see the Christian city growing day by day, a clear sign that their besiegers were there to stay, regardless of how long it took. The visual impact of Santa Fe, a city rising from the ashes of a temporary camp, must have been a demoralizing sight for the besieged. Life in Santa Fe during the siege was a blend of military readiness and courtly routine. Isabella maintained her court, there conducting state affairs, receiving ambassadors, and making critical decisions alongside Ferdinand. Her presence provided stability and leadership, ensuring that the long siege did not devolve into disorganization or despair. She also took a personal interest in the welfare of her soldiers, visiting the sick and wounded, and ensuring that supplies of food and wine were consistent. This direct engagement with the troops fostered loyalty and bolstered morale, essential elements for any protracted military campaign. The siege itself involved constant pressure on Granada. Skirmishes along the city walls were frequent, and bombardments from artillery were regular occurrences. Christian forces employed various siege engines, including trebuchets, to hurl stones and other projectiles into the city, aiming to weaken its defenses and demoralize its inhabitants. The defenders, led by Sultan Muhammad XII, also known as Boabdil, responded with their own sorties and counterattacks, often fiercely contested. As the months turned into the fall and winter of 1491, the conditions within Granada grew increasingly dire. The city's food supplies dwindled, and the constant bombardment took its toll on the morale of the populace. Disease began to spread, exacerbated by overcrowded conditions and poor sanitation. Chronicler Andrés Bernaldez, in his Historia Don Fernando y Dona Isabel, described the increasing desperation within the city as the siege wore on. Sultan Boabdil made attempts to negotiate terms of surrender, but Isabella and Ferdinand remained firm in their demands for the complete capitulation of the city. The negotiations were protracted, with both sides seeking to gain the most favorable terms. Isabella's resolve during these negotiations was unwavering. She understood the historical significance of capturing Granada and was unwilling to compromise on the terms of surrender. Finally, after months of negotiation, Sultan Boabdil agreed to surrender Granada on January 2, 1492. The terms of surrender, known as the Treaty of Granada, allowed the Granadan inhabitants to retain their property, laws, customs, and religious freedom, at least initially. Isabella and Ferdinand entered Granada in a solemn procession, riding on horseback through the city gates. The Nasrid banner was lowered from the Alhambra, and the Christian standard was raised in its place, marking the end of centuries of Muslim rule in Spain. Isabella's presence at this momentous event was deeply symbolic. It affirmed her integral role in the final victory of the Reconquista. Her personal commitment to the war, her logistical genius in establishing Santa Fe, and her unwavering political will throughout the 10-year campaign were decisive factors in the success of the long siege of Granada. The fall of Granada was not just a military victory. It was a profound cultural and political turning point in the history of Spain, one that Isabella had meticulously helped to orchestrate from the outset. Number 2. Olga of Kiev and the vengeful siege of Izkorostin. In the mid-10th century, the land of Rus, a collection of East Slavic tribes and Viking settlers, was a patchwork of developing principalities. The Drevlians, a tribal union residing in the dense forests, were one such group known for their fierce independence and occasional friction with the emerging Kievan Rus. The ruler of Kiev at the time was Prince Igor, husband of Olga. In 945, Prince Igor set out to collect tribute from the Drevlians, a task that was often fraught with danger. According to the primary chronicle, also known as the Tale of Bygone Years, a foundational historical document for early East Slavs, Igor attempted to collect tribute a second time within a single season, a move that angered the Drevlians greatly. They rebelled and brutally murdered Prince Igor, reportedly tearing him apart between two bent trees. This act of extreme violence left his young son Svyatoslav as the nominal ruler of Kiev, with his mother Olga stepping in as regent. Olga, a woman of strong will and deep conviction, was not one to allow such an affront to pass unpunished. Her vengeance against the Drevlians, particularly their capital city of Izkorostin, would become legendary, a testament to her cunning and ruthless determination. The Drevlians, perhaps emboldened by their success in killing Igor, made a strategic miscalculation, believing that Olga, as a woman, would be easily swayed or intimidated. They sent 20 emissaries to Kiev with a proposal. They invited her to marry their Prince Mao, whom they hoped would then rule Kiev. This offer was an attempt to absorb Kiev into their own domain and consolidate their power. Olga received the Drevlian delegation with an outward show of hospitality, masking her true intentions. Primary chronicle details a series of elaborate and deadly traps she set for the Drevlian envoys, each designed to inflict maximum retribution. Her methods were not direct military confrontation initially, but a series of calculated deceits leading to the systematic extermination of their leadership, weakening their ability to resist her eventual military advance. For the first group of 20 Drevlian envoys, Olga ordered a deep ditch dug near her court. She then invited the envoys, who had arrived by boat, to be carried on their boats into her court, ostensibly to honor them. Once they were inside the trench, she ordered them, buried alive, boats and all. This horrifying act was just the beginning. She then sent a message to the Drevlians, asking them to send their most distinguished men to Kiev, saying she desired to show them even greater honor. Before marrying Prince Mao, the Drevlians, unaware of the fate of the first group, eagerly sent their best men. When these new envoys arrived, Olga invited them to bathe in a bathhouse to refresh themselves after their journey. Once they were all inside, the doors were locked and the bathhouse was set ablaze, burning the Drevlian nobles to death. These acts of perfidy eliminated the Drevlians' most influential and powerful leaders, leaving them significantly weakened and without clear direction. Olga's vengeance was methodical and thorough, stripping her enemies of their strategic minds before she even marched her army. Still not satisfied, Olga sent yet another message to the Drevlians, asking them to prepare a grand feast for her near Izkorostin, the capital, where her husband had been killed. She claimed she wished to weep over her husband's grave. There, before proceeding with the marriage arrangements, the Drevlians, perhaps bewildered or still trying to appease her, complied. Olga then traveled to Izkorostin with a small retinue of her own soldiers. At the funeral feast, she persuaded the Drevlians to drink deeply of mead, intoxicating them. Once they were thoroughly drunk and disorganized, Olga gave the signal to her soldiers. The Kievan warriors fell upon the Drevlians, slaughtering an estimated 5,000 of them. This was not a formal siege, but a preemptive strike. A massacre designed to decimate the Drevlian fighting force and further deduplize their leadership. Primary Chronicle recounts this event with grim satisfaction, highlighting Olga's capacity for cold, calculated cruelty. After these horrific preliminary acts of vengeance, Olga finally turned her attention to the city of Iskorostan itself. Having decimated their leadership and military strength through trickery, she was now ready for a direct assault. She led her own army to the city, initiating a final siege. Iskorostan was a fortified settlement, and despite their losses, the remaining Drevlian inhabitants likely put up a desperate defense, knowing the fate that awaited them if they surrendered. The siege dragged on for a year. Olga, however, was not only patient but also incredibly cunning. She understood that a direct assault on the fortified city might be costly in terms of lives for her own forces. Instead, she devised a final audacious trick, one that would cement her legacy as a master of deceptive warfare. Olga sent a message to the besieged inhabitants of Iskorostan, offering a peace proposal. She told them that her vengeance was satisfied with the slaughter of their previous envoys and nobles. All she requested now, as a sign of their submission and tribute, was a small gift from each household: 3 pigeons and 3 sparrows. This was an unbelievably small demand compared to the wealth and lives they had lost, or compared to the tribute Igor had originally demanded. The Drevlians, exhausted by the year-long siege and desperate for an end to the hostilities, readily agreed to this seemingly trivial request, collecting the birds and sending them to Olga. Their relief must have been immense, believing they had escaped with so little. Olga received the birds, but her plan was far from complete. She ordered her soldiers to attach a piece of samphire, along with a small piece of cloth, to the leg of each bird. As night fell, Olga ordered her soldiers to release all the birds. The pigeons and sparrows, driven by instinct, immediately flew back to their nests within Iskorostan, seeking out their homes and roosting places in the city's wooden houses, barns, and thatched roofs. Once the birds had settled in their nests, Olga commanded her soldiers to light the sulfur attached to their legs. The burning sulfur ignited the cloth, and as the birds landed, they carried the flames directly into the flammable structures of the city. The dry wood and thatch of Iskorostan's buildings caught fire almost simultaneously across the city. Primary Chronicle vividly describes the scene, stating that the entire city was ablaze at once. The inhabitants of Iskorostan were plunged into chaos and panic. Trapped within their burning city, they had no means of extinguishing the widespread fires. As they desperately tried to flee the inferno, they found themselves facing Olga's army, which stood ready outside the city walls. Many Drevlians perished in the flames, while those who managed to escape the burning city were either captured or slaughtered by the Kievan forces. Olga's final act of vengeance was complete. She had not only destroyed the Drevlian capital, but had also completely subjugated the tribe. Those who survived were either enslaved or forced to pay a heavy tribute, ensuring their submission to Kiev. Olga then returned to Kiev, her power solidified and her reputation as a formidable and merciless ruler cemented. Her siege of Iskorostan, executed through a series of psychological and military deceptions, demonstrated a strategic brilliance that secured the Kievan Rus's dominance over its rebellious neighbors. Number 3. Matilda of England and the Desperate Siege of Oxford. The mid-12th century in England was a period of intense civil war known as the Anarchy. Following the death of King Henry I in 1135, a struggle for the English throne erupted between his daughter, Matilda, often referred to as Empress Matilda, due to her earlier marriage to the Holy Roman Emperor. Both had strong claims to the throne, leading to nearly 2 decades of brutal conflict marked by shifting alliances, castle sieges, and widespread devastation across the English countryside. Matilda, a determined and formidable woman, had been designated by her father as his successor, a highly unusual move for the time. However, upon Henry's death, Stephen swiftly seized the throne, claiming it by right of ancient custom. Matilda, backed by her half-brother, Robert, Earl of Gloucester, and various powerful barons, launched a relentless campaign to reclaim her rightful inheritance. She was a constant presence in the fighting, directing strategies, and personally leading forces. By 1141, the tide seemed to turn in Matilda's favor. The Battle of Lincoln, Stephen was captured and Matilda was poised to be crowned Queen of England. She entered London, but her haughty demeanor and refusal to grant concessions to the city's powerful citizens, and the clergy quickly alienated key supporters. The Londoners rose up against her, forcing her to flee the city. Soon after, her half-brother Robert of Gloucester was captured by Stephen's forces, a severe blow to her cause. Matilda, weakened and on the defensive, retreated to Oxford, a strategically important town with a strong castle. This castle, built partly by her father Henry I, was a formidable stronghold, situated at the confluence of the Thames and Cherwell rivers, offering natural defenses. Matilda believed she would be safe within its walls. However, King Stephen, now freed in exchange for Robert of Gloucester and regaining his strength, moved swiftly to consolidate his power. In September 1142, Stephen marched on Oxford with his army and laid siege to the castle where Matilda was sheltering. The Siege of Oxford was not just an ordinary military operation. It was a critical moment in the anarchy. Capturing Matilda would effectively end the Civil War and secure Stephen's reign. Stephen's forces completely encircled Oxford Castle, cutting off its access to supplies and any possibility of relief. The medieval chronicler William of Malmesbury, in his Historia Novella, provides some of the most detailed accounts of this period, describing the intense pressure Stephen applied to the castle's defenses. Stephen's troops launched repeated assaults on the castle walls, attempting to breach its defenses through direct attack. They also employed various siege engines, including mangonels and trebuchets, to hurl large stones and other projectiles against the fortifications, aiming to weaken the walls and demoralize the defenders. Inside Oxford Castle, Matilda found herself in a desperate situation. The garrison was limited, and as the siege wore on, resources began to dwindle. The late autumn and early winter months brought harsh conditions with biting winds and eventually heavy snowfalls. Food supplies, meticulously rationed at first, became scarce. Constant bombardment from Stephen's siege engines took its toll, damaging parts of the castle and exposing the defenders to the elements. The morale within the castle walls must have been severely tested, as the days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. The defenders, loyal to Matilda, held out stubbornly, but the odds were stacked against them. The chronicler Henry of Huntingdon, in his Historia Anglorum, also commented on the severity of the winter and the hardships faced by those within the besieged castle. As December approached, the weather grew even more severe. The freezing temperatures and heavy snow transformed the landscape around Oxford into a treacherous, icy expanse. The River Thames, which provided some natural defense for the castle, began to freeze over. Conditions inside the castle worsened dramatically. Hunger and exposure became constant threats. It became clear to Matilda and her advisors that the castle could not hold out much longer. A direct military relief force was unlikely to break through Stephen's strong blockade, especially in the treacherous winter conditions. Matilda had to devise a plan for escape, a plan that would require both immense courage and a clever use of the challenging environment. Matilda, known for her sharp intellect and strategic thinking, decided on a bold and highly risky escape attempt. She understood that her continued presence in the castle was a liability. If captured, her cause would be lost. She needed to escape, even if it meant leaving behind her remaining loyalists in the castle, hoping they could negotiate a surrender. The plan was to exploit the deep snow and a frozen river, using them as a cover for her clandestine departure. On a particularly dark and snowy night in December 1142, Matilda put her plan into action. She dressed herself in a white cloak designed to blend in with the snow-covered ground, making her virtually invisible against the stark white landscape. This was not a moment for elaborate royal attire. Practicality and survival were paramount. Accompanied by only a handful of her most trusted knights, also cloaked in white, Matilda was lowered from a window or a postern gate of the castle. Using a rope, the exact point of her egress is debated by historians, but the common narrative suggests a stealthy descent from the heavily guarded castle. The frozen surface of the River Thames, normally an impassable barrier, now provided a precarious path across the water. Moving slowly and silently through the deep snow and across the ice-covered river, Matilda and her small party managed to slip past Stephen's unsuspecting sentries. The heavy snowfall and the bitter cold worked in their favor, reducing visibility and discouraging the besiegers from keeping a particularly close watch. The Justice Stephani, a contemporary account of Stephen's reign, also records the miraculous nature of her escape, marveling at her audacity. Matilda's escape was a grueling ordeal. She journeyed across the snow-laden countryside, walking through the night and likely enduring extreme physical hardship. Her destination was Abingdon, a nearby town, from which she then proceeded to Wallingford Castle, a stronghold held by her staunch supporter Brian Fitz, Count. Her survival and successful evasion of capture sent a powerful message to her allies and enemies alike. Despite the immediate loss of Oxford Castle, which surrendered to Stephen the following day, Matilda's escape was a significant moral victory. It demonstrated her resilience and her continued commitment to the fight. The siege of Oxford and Matilda's escape had a profound impact on the course of the anarchy. While Stephen secured Oxford, he failed to capture his primary rival, allowing the Civil War to drag on for several more years. Matilda continued to lead her cause from her strongholds in the west of England, notably Wallingford and Gloucester. Her ability to escape such a desperate situation under such dire conditions became a legendary tale that underscored her indomitable spirit. Although she never secured the throne in her own right, her son Henry II eventually ascended to the English throne, establishing the Plantagenet dynasty, a testament to Matilda's relentless struggle and her refusal to surrender. The Siege of Oxford serves as a vivid example of a medieval queen facing extreme pressure, leading her people from within a besieged castle and executing a daring and effective plan of survival. Number 4. Blanche of Castile and the Strategic Siege of La Rochelle. The early 13th century in France was a period of consolidation and expansion for the Capetian monarchy. Following the death of King Louis VIII in 1226, his young son, Louis IX, inherited the throne at the tender age of 12. This meant that the real power rested with his mother, Blanche of Castile, who was appointed regent. Blanche was a granddaughter of Eleanor of Aquitaine and possessed a formidable intellect, sharp political acumen, and unwavering determination. Her regency was fraught with challenges. The powerful French barons, ever eager to assert their independence from the crown, saw the minority of the young king as an opportunity to challenge royal authority. Furthermore, England still holding territories in France, particularly the Aquitaine region, posed a constant threat. Blanche's role as regent was not merely administrative. She actively managed military campaigns, strategically directing forces to quell rebellions and defend French interests. One of the most significant military campaigns during her regency was the ongoing struggle against English presence in France. King Henry III of England, buoyed by the support of disaffected French nobles, sought to reclaim territories lost by his father, King John, to Louis VIII. A crucial strategic point in this Anglo-French conflict was La Rochelle, a major port city on the Atlantic coast. La Rochelle was part of the traditional Plantagenet domains in Aquitaine, and served as a vital link between England and its continental possessions. Its control was essential for both sides. For the English, it was a gateway. For the French, its capture would be a significant step in expelling English influence from the continent. While Blanche was regent, not a battlefield commander in the mold of a knight, leading a charge, her strategic leadership and meticulous organization were the driving force behind the French efforts. She orchestrated the raising of armies, secured finances, and devised the overall campaign strategies. In 1224, even before Louis VIII's death, but under his command with Blanche's full support, French forces under the leadership of Louis VIII's younger brother, Prince Louis, the future Louis IX, laid siege to La Rochelle. Blanche of Castile played a pivotal role in ensuring the success of this siege, as she was the ultimate authority behind the war effort, even during her husband's reign. The city of La Rochelle was strongly fortified with robust walls and a well-defended harbor. It was garrisoned by English troops and loyal Poitevin nobility, making it a difficult target. The French approach to the siege was comprehensive. They understood that to take the city, they needed to cut off both land and sea access. French forces established a tight blockade by land, preventing any supplies or reinforcements from reaching the city's defenders. This involved building circumvallation lines and setting up siege camps around the city's perimeter. Simultaneously, the French marshaled a naval force to blockade the port. Control of the sea lanes was crucial for La Rochelle, as it depended on maritime trade and relief from England. The French navy, though not as dominant as the English, was sufficient to prevent regular resupply of the city. The siege was long and arduous, characteristic of medieval sieges, testing the patience and endurance of both besiegers and besieged. Conditions inside La Rochelle deteriorated as the blockade tightened. Food and fresh water became scarce, and disease began to spread among the garrison and the civilian population. The constant pressure from the French forces, through both direct assaults on the walls and the psychological toll of the blockade, began to wear down the defenders. Blanche's contribution to the siege, even at a distance, was critical. She ensured the constant flow of supplies to the French army. Medieval sieges were incredibly resource-intensive, requiring vast quantities of food, water, weapons, siege engines, and construction materials. Her administrative abilities and attention to logistics were legendary. She raised funds, gathered provisions from across the royal domain, and organized their transport to the besieging army. This level of logistical support was essential for maintaining a long siege, preventing the army from disbanding due to lack of provisions or morale. The French chronicler Guillaume the Breton, in his Gesta Philippi or Augusti, which touched upon events after Philip Augustus's reign, highlighted the efficient management of the royal court's resources during military campaign. Beyond logistics, Blanche also maintained political pressure on the rebellious barons who might have sought to undermine the siege or aid the English. Her diplomacy and intelligence network kept her informed of any plots or disaffection, allowing her to preemptively address challenges to royal authority. This behind-the-scenes management of political affairs ensured that the military effort remained focused and well-supported. The siege continued for several months. The English, aware of the strategic importance of La Rochelle, attempted to send a relief force by sea, but the French naval blockade, combined with unfavorable weather, prevented it from reaching the city. With no hope of relief and facing severe deprivation, the garrison of La Rochelle eventually surrendered to the French forces in August 1224. The fall of La Rochelle was a major strategic victory for the French crown, effectively severing England's primary naval link to its remaining continental territories in Aquitaine. This triumph significantly diminished English influence in the region and bolstered the authority of the Capetian monarchy. For Blanche of Castile, it was a testament to her effective leadership, demonstrating her capacity to manage complex military campaigns, even when not physically present on the battlefield. Her ability to secure the necessary resources, maintain logistical lines, and suppress internal dissent proved instrumental in the successful outcome of the siege. This victory not only solidified French control over a vital port, but also further enhanced the prestige of the young king, Louis IX's reign. Even though it was his mother, Blanche, who was truly steering the ship of state during this critical period, her strategic vision and meticulous attention to detail were the true forces behind the walls of La Rochelle, collapsing under French pressure. Number 5. Margaret of Anjou and the calculated pressure on London. The mid-15th century in England was consumed by the Wars of the Roses, a brutal dynastic struggle for the English throne between the House of Lancaster, symbolized by a red rose, and the House of York, symbolized by a white rose. At the heart of the Lancastrian cause was Queen Margaret of Anjou, wife of King Henry VI. Henry was a weak and often incapacitated king, prone to bouts of mental illness, which meant that Margaret often acted as the de facto ruler and the driving force behind the Lancastrian war effort. She was a fierce and uncompromising leader, deeply committed to securing her son's inheritance and preserving the Lancastrian dynasty. Her determination earned her the moniker She-Wolf of France from her Yorkist opponents, a testament to her ferocity and strategic cunning. Margaret was not just a queen. She was a military commander, personally leading armies and directing campaigns across the country. By late 1460, the Lancastrian cause seemed on the brink of collapse. Richard, Duke of York, had asserted his claim to the throne and had defeated the Lancastrians at the Battle of Northampton, capturing King Henry VI. York then marched on London, effectively taking control of the government. However, Margaret of Anjou, who had fled to Scotland, began to gather support in the north of England, raising a formidable army composed of loyal Lancastrian lords, Scottish allies, and northern. Her goal was clear: to relieve her husband, recapture London, and reassert Lancastrian control. Margaret's march south was a calculated military campaign, not just a desperate flight. Her army was large, but it faced significant logistical challenges moving through a country already devastated by war and often hostile to Lancastrian forces. Campaign culminated in two major engagements that placed direct and indirect pressure on London. The first was the Battle of Wakefield in December 1460, where Margaret's forces achieved a stunning victory over Richard of York, killing him and his second son Edmund, Earl of Rutland. This decisive win severely weakened the Yorkist leadership and opened the path south towards London. Margaret's army now swelled with momentum, and a thirst for further victories continued its advance, causing widespread alarm among the Yorkist-controlled capital. Paston letters, a collection of correspondence from this period, frequently mention the fear and uncertainty gripping Londoners as Margaret's army approached, detailing the rumors and the preparations for defense. As Margaret's army moved south, it engaged a second Yorkist force at the Second Battle of St. Albans. In February 1461, this battle was fought to the north of London, and its outcome would directly impact the capital. The Yorkist army, commanded by the powerful Earl of Warwick, the Kingmaker, had set up defenses to block Margaret's advance on London. Crucially, King Henry VI was with Warwick's forces. Effectively held captive, Margaret's strategic objective was not just to defeat Warwick, but to liberate her husband and then press on London. The battle itself was fierce. Margaret's Lancastrian forces, though lacking in heavy artillery, outmaneuvered the Yorkists, flanking their positions and eventually causing a rout. During the confusion of the battle, Margaret's forces managed to locate King Henry VI, who was sitting under a tree, reportedly singing during the fighting. He was liberated from Yorkist control, a major triumph for Margaret and the Lancastrian cause. With Warwick's army scattered and King Henry VI free, Margaret's army now had a clear path to London. The city was in a state of panic. Many wealthy citizens, staunchly Yorkist, feared retribution and the plunder of their homes. The threat of Margaret's army, which had a reputation for undisciplined looting as it marched south, a common practice for medieval armies but particularly feared in this instance, caused widespread terror. London was effectively under siege, not by direct assault on its walls, but by the overwhelming psychological pressure of a victorious and large army camped outside its gates. Margaret, now reunited with her king, was at the head of this intimidating force. Chronicle of John Warkworth details the fear within London and the arguments among the city's aldermen about whether to open their gates to the Lancastrians. However, Margaret faced a difficult decision. While she had her king and a victorious army, her supplies were low, and her northern troops, having been away from home for a long time, were eager to return north with their spoils. More critically, news arrived that the formidable Yorkist commander Edward, Earl of March, soon to be King Edward IV, was marching rapidly towards London from the west with a newly raised army. Margaret's strategic goal was to secure London and establish her son as undisputed heir. But with her army potentially unraveling due to logistical issues and the approach of a fresh, strong Yorkist force, she faced a tactical dilemma. Allowing her troops to enter London, where they might have engaged in widespread looting, could further alienate the already wary citizens and make it harder to consolidate control. Furthermore, a prolonged stay in the city might trap her against Edward's approaching army. Despite her immense pressure on London, Margaret ultimately decided not to force her way into the city immediately. Instead, she led her army north again, choosing to consolidate her position and confront Edward's approaching army on more favorable ground. This decision, while seemingly a retreat from London's gates, was a calculated strategic move. She released King Henry VI into the city, an attempt to appease the Londoners, but it did not sway them. The city, having endured the fear of Margaret's army, eventually opened its gates to Edward, Earl of March, who was swiftly crowned King Edward IV. While Margaret did not physically take London in 1461, her relentless campaign, culminating in the victories at Wakefield and St. Albans, effectively put the most intense and sustained military pressure on the capital during the early years of the Wars of the Roses. She had taken King Henry VI back, defeated Yorkist armies, and forced London into a state of panic and near surrender. Her strategic leadership during this period, bringing her army to the very gates of the capital and dictating the terms of engagement, showcased her profound influence as a military commander. One of the few queens in medieval England to command forces on such a large scale and put such direct coward pressure on the seat of royal power. Number 6. Urraca of Leon and Castile and the contentious siege of Sahagun. The early 12th century in the Iberian Peninsula was a turbulent time for the nascent Christian kingdom. Following the death of King Alfonso VI of Leon and Castile in 1109, his only surviving legitimate child, Urraca, inherited the throne. This was a groundbreaking event, as Urraca became the first queen regnant in European history, ruling in her own right rather than as a consort or regent. Her reign, however, was immediately plunged into conflict. To secure her succession and strengthen the kingdom, her father had arranged her marriage to Alfonso I, the powerful and ambitious king of Aragon and Navarre. This marriage, intended to unite the two largest Christian realms, instead sparked years of bitter civil war, as the two monarchs quickly fell out and their respective noble factions clashed. Urraca, far from being a passive figure, proved to be an active and determined ruler, often leading her own armies and participating directly in the military struggles that defined her reign. The marriage between Urraca and Alfonso I was a disaster. Their personalities clashed, and their political ambitions were incompatible. Alfonso, often referred to as the battler for his military prowess, sought to assert his authority over Urraca's kingdom, treating Leon and Castile as conquered territory. Urraca, fiercely independent and deeply loyal to her Castilian heritage. The marriage quickly broke down, leading to an open war between husband and wife, a conflict that fractured the kingdoms and drew in powerful nobles, foreign mercenaries, and even the church. Urraca found herself battling not only her estranged husband but also rebellious nobles within her own realm and external threats from Almohad forces to the south. One of the key episodes in Urraca's military career was the siege of Sahagun in 1111. Sahagun was a strategically important town in Leon, home to a powerful Benedictine monastery, the Real Monasterio de San Benito. The monastery, enriched by royal patronage over centuries, had become a significant economic and political power center, and its abbots often wielded considerable influence. In the tumultuous atmosphere of Urraca's reign, Sahagun became a focal point of resistance to royal authority. The town and its monastery were effectively controlled by a faction of rebellious nobles who had aligned themselves with Urraca's estranged husband, Alfonso I of Aragon, or sought independence from her direct rule. Urraca, needing to reassert her control over this vital region and punish the rebellious elements, decided to lay siege to Sahagun. Urraca personally led the royal army to Sahagun. Her presence at the head of her troops was not merely symbolic. She directed the military operations, a common practice for monarchs of the time, regardless of gender. The siege of Sahagun was a complex affair reflecting the fragmented nature of the warfare during her reign. It was not a simple battle between two unified forces, but a dynamic struggle involving shifting loyalties and multiple factions. The defenses of Sahagun included strong walls and the formidable monastic complex itself, which could also serve as a stronghold. The defenders were well provisioned and determined, resisting Urraca's attempts to take the town quickly. During the siege, Urraca's forces employed standard medieval siege tactics. They would have established a blockade around the town, attempting to cut off supplies and reinforcements. Siege engines such as trebuchets and catapults would have been used to hurl projectiles at the walls and within the town, aiming to breach defenses and demoralize the defenders. Constant pressure from Urraca's army through skirmishes and direct assaults on the gates or weak points in the walls would have kept the garrison under constant strain. The Chronica Latina, Regum Castile, a contemporary source, mentions Urraca's active role in the numerous military engagements of her reign, highlighting her resolve and resilience. However, the siege of Sahagun was not just a test of military strength, it was also a test of political will. The rebellious nobles within Sahagun expected relief from Alfonso I of Aragon, or at least diplomatic intervention on their behalf. Urraca, understanding the broader political implications, had to maintain the siege, while also managing her numerous other conflicts. Her campaign against Sahagun was also designed to send a clear message to other rebellious elements across her kingdom that she was a queen who would enforce her authority with military might. The siege was prolonged, as was common for fortified towns of the period. The town's defenders held out stubbornly, hoping for external assistance. Urraca, however, maintained the pressure. Her persistence eventually paid off. Facing dwindling resources and no immediate prospect of relief, the inhabitants and garrison of Sahagun were compelled to negotiate terms of surrender. The exact details of the surrender and the length of the siege are somewhat sparse in the surviving chronicles, but it is clear that Urraca's forces were ultimately successful. It demonstrated her ability to overcome internal rebellions and reassert royal authority in a strategically important region. It solidified her control over parts of her kingdom that had been wavering in their loyalty. While her reign continued to be marked by conflicts with Alfonso I and other challenges, the successful siege of Sahagun underscored Urraca's active and effective leadership as a warrior queen. It cemented her reputation as a monarch capable of leading armies in the field, defying the gender norms of her era, and securing her position through direct military action. Her involvement in the siege of Sahagun serves as a compelling example of a medieval queen leading her forces to achieve a critical military objective against significant odds and amidst constant political turmoil.